Ch.36, admiring the flower through red clouds, a heart full of sympathy. The words that came out of Hua Cheng's mouth were exceedingly condescending and rude, but the moment he spoke, the man in question allowed taunting from all around and dared not fight back. The attendant who had led Si Lian to the long table smiled. "Young master, you're very lucky today." Si Lian never moved his gaze from the long table. "How so?" "Our Lord is here to play," the attendant replied. "It's only these past couple of days that he was in the mood to pass by, so isn't this good luck?" By her tone, Si Lian could tell that the attendant had great respect for the Lord, and very much idolized him, as if just seeing him was the greatest of honors. Si Lian couldn't help but smile. The screen curtain was soft and silky, the red silhouette captivating. Such a sight was truly enchanting. In front of the red curtain were a couple of charming women overlooking the gambling table. At first, Si Lian was content to just watch from the background, but the moment he heard Hua Cheng's voice, he started trying to push himself through the crowd without drawing any attention to the fact that he was there. Finally, he made it through to the table and saw the man who was in the middle of putting down his bets. It was a human. Si Lian wasn't surprised, since it was already known that within Ghost City there weren't just ghosts, there were also many cultivators with considerable skill, and sometimes mere mortals who were looking for their own death. The gambling man had a mask on, but both his eyes were visible, bulging and laced with red as if bleeding. His lips were pale as if he hadn't seen the sun in days. He was a picture of a ghost, more so than any ghosts present. Both of his hands were pressed tightly on a black wooden dice cup on the table, and after holding back for a moment, he shouted, seeming to have given up on everything. "But how come the other guy was able to bet both his legs?" One of the croupiers before the red curtain smiled. The one before used to be an acclaimed bandit, who was known for his light footwork and ability to take flight wherever he went. It was the crux of his life, so his legs were worthy as a bet. "You're neither an artisan nor a medic. What worth does your arm possess?" The man gritted his teeth. "Then I bet 10 years worth of my only daughter's life." Si Lian was stunned to hear those words, and thought, where on earth is there a father who is willing to bet on the life of his children? Is that even possible? Behind the curtain, Hua Cheng only snorted. Very well. Si Lian couldn't tell if it was his imagination, but he could sense coldness from those words. But then he added mentally, San Lang had always said he has good luck, and all of his fortune sticks came up the best of luck. If he bets against this man, wouldn't he for sure win, and take away 10 years of life from that man's daughter? He was just thinking this when the croupier announced sweetly, even will be a loss, odds will be a win. Once the cup is open, there will be no turning back. Now please. Turns out Hua Cheng wouldn't be betting in the pool in the first place. That man shook the gambling cup haphazardly, both hands grasping onto it hard, and the hall quieted down. The sounds of the dice rattling could be heard loud and crisply. Then, his movement slowed to a stop. Silence reigned. It was after a long moment before the man slowly, very slowly, lifted a corner of the gambling cup and peeped through the gap. His red eyes suddenly widened. He flipped open the cup and shouted with mad joy. Odd! 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 Exclamation mark. I win. I've won. I've won. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. I've won. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. This was not the outcome the crowd of humans and ghosts surrounding the long table wanted to see, and they started booing down the man, sapping the table and shouting the discontent. One of the croupiers smiled and said, "Congratulations. The fate of your business will soon see a turnaround." The man laughed uproariously and cried, "Wait. I want to bet again." The croupier smiled. "You're welcome to. What do you want this time?" Single quote. The man's face dropped and said, I want everyone competing with me in my business to drop dead." Hearing this, the crowd started muttering and ticking their tongues. The croupier raised a hand to cover her smile. "If that is your wish, then it's much more difficult to fulfill than your previous wish. Won't you consider a different wish, like asking for your business to flourish?" Yet the man replied, with his eyes red, "No. That's the only thing I want to bet on. That's what I'm betting for." "Then, if that is your wish, 10 years of your daughter's life may not be enough," the croupier said. "If that's not enough, I'll bet 20 years of her life. And the fate of her marriage on top of that." The crowd was stunned and burst out laughing. The dad lost his mind. "He's selling his daughter. Exclamation mark. Amazing, too amazing. Exclamation mark." The croupier announced once again, "Even will be a loss, odd will be a win. Once the cup is opened, there will be no going back. Now please." That man took up the gambling cup once more, his hands shaking. If he lost, then his daughter would lose. 20 years of her life and a good marriage, obviously not ideal, but if he won, then all of his competitors would drop dead. Although Si Lian thought Hua Cheng would never let such a thing happen, after much hesitation, he still stepped forward. He was just thinking on whether he should join in using some small trick when suddenly someone grabbed hold of him. He turned his head to see, and it was Shi Qingxuan. Shi Qingxuan had returned to his male form, and whispered, "Don't be rash." Si Lian whispered back, "Lord Wind Master, why did you transform back?" "It's a long story," Shi Qingxuan sighed. "That group of women dragged me around saying they were going to introduce me to good beauty parlors. I finally escaped, but they caught me again, so I had to change back. They dragged me to a place that smeared so much stuff on my face, pulling, stretching, slapping, smacking. Quick, check my face. How is it? Anything wrong? Do you see anything off with my face?" He pushed his face right up to Si Lian to be inspected, and Si Lian dutifully gave it a detailed look. Before replying truthfully, "I think it looks even smoother and whiter than before." Shi Qingxuan brightened immediately. "Really? Oh good. That's wonderful. Ha 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 ha. Is there a mirror? Where's the mirror? I want to see." "Look later," Si Lian said. "The ghost city is blocking our spiritual communication, so let's not lose each other again. By the way, how did you know I was here, Lord Wind Master?" "I didn't," Shi Qingxuan replied. "I came because Qianchu and I had already agreed to meet here. When we lost each other earlier, I just came here instead, but when I walked in, turns out you were here too. You called Qianchu out. Xi Lian asked. To meet here. Yeah, Qi Qingxuan replied. Qianchu is that Lang Qianchu, His Highness Tai Hua. You know that much. At least, right. He's the martial god of the East. Since we're here, it's best if he came too. The Gamblers' Den is one of the most bustling and the most chaotic places in Ghost City. It's a landmark. Many people and ghosts alike go in and out. It's much less conspicuous for us to be about, so I told him to meet us here. Xi Lian nodded. When he turned back to the long table, that man still hadn't opened the cup. His eyes were rolled back and he was muttering, not unlike many of the ghosts there. Xi Lian sighed. This man, Qi Qingxuan said as he felt his face, I know what you want to say, and I agree. But the ghost city is Hua Cheng's territory, and the rules here were all adhered to willingly. If you dare gamble, then you can play. The heavens can do nothing. Let's just observe, and we can come up with something if anything gets out of hand. Xi Lian hummed, thinking there was no way San Lang would allow anything to get out of hand, so it would indeed be best to just observe. The gambling man finally seemed to gather enough courage and opened just a slither of the gambling cup to reveal the outcome. Just then, another person busted in, shut down the gambling cup with a strike, and crushed it to pieces. This strike not only crushed the gambling cup, but also the hand that was on top of it, and the entire table splintered with a deep crack. The masked man cradled his crushed hand, and rolled all over the floor screaming. The crowd of ghosts also started shouting, some cheering, and some crying in shock. The person who struck out yelled, "You! What a villainous heart! If you wished for wealth and fortune, then no matter, but you wished for others to drop dead. If you wanted to bet, then have the guts to bet your own life, and not the life and marriage of your daughter. You're not fit to be a man, not fit to be a father." The young man had sword-like brows and stars for eyes, bursting with heroic aura. Although his clothes were simple and not a bit glamorous, his air of nobility couldn't be concealed. It was none other than the Crown Prince of Yong'an, Lang Qianchu. Seeing him, Xi Lian and Qi Qingxuan both covered their faces at the same time in the crowd. Xi Lian groaned. "Lord Windmaster, did you not tell him to be a little more careful when coming here, and keep it low-key?" Qi Qingxuan whined back, I told him, but he's always like that. What can I do? Had I known earlier, I would have planned for us to come down together. Xi Lian sympathized. I get it, I understand. Just then, Hua Cheng chuckled lightly from behind the curtains. Xi Lian's heart skipped a beat. The boy had often laughed when he was with Xi Lian, so now Xi Lian was able to tell somewhat whether the laughter was genuine happiness, mockery, or laced with killing intent. A voice said lazily, "You must have guts of steel to start trouble here in my territory." Lang Qianchu turned to face the direction of the voice, with fire in his eyes. "Are you the owner of this gambler's den?" The crowd jeered. "Foolish bastard, do you even know who you're talking to? This is our lord." Some sneered coldly. "Not only does he own this gambler's den, this entire ghost city is his." Lang Qianchu barely showed any reaction when hearing this, but Qi Qingxuan, on the other hand, was completely taken aback. "My dear God, is that who I think it is behind the curtain?" Xi Lian answered, "Yes, it's him." Qi Qingxuan asked again, "Are you sure?" Exclamation mark. Si Lian replied, "I'm certain." Qi Qingxuan panicked. "We're dead, we're dead. What do we do about Qianqiu now?" Exclamation mark. Si Lian said after a while, "Let's hope he doesn't expose himself." Yet the more Lang Qianqiu looked around, the angrier he became, and he demanded this hellish place. Reeks of smoke and corruption, and is filled to the brim with demonic chaos. What kind of scum are you? Just what do you think you're doing here? Running a place like this, you guys really don't have a single trace of humanity in you. The crowd booed in unison. We ain't humans anyway, what do we need humanity for? That sort of useless notion, whoever wants it can take it. Who do you think you are, coming all the way here to point fingers at us? Exclamation mark. Fu Cheng said, amused, "This den of mine has been a mad hellish place to begin with. There's a path for you in heaven, but you refuse to take it, and instead choose to barge into hell. What shall we do with you?" After hearing the word heaven, Si Lian and Qi Qingxuan instantly knew. Fu Cheng had already seen through Lang Qianqiu and knew exactly where he had come from. Yet Lang Qianqiu completely missed the meaning behind his words and slammed his hand down on the table once more. He was standing at the end of the table, and with this one strike, he sent the entire table flying towards the red shadow behind the curtains. Those who had originally gathered around the table dodged to the sides. However, the sitting silhouette behind the curtain didn't move. With a wave of his hand, the long table was flung back in the opposite direction, towards Lang Qianqiu. Seeing the incoming flying object, Lang Qianqiu used one hand to push it back, but then realized that it wasn't enough and switched to both hands. Seconds ticked by and blue veins gradually surfaced on his forehead. The once bustling hall now had people and ghosts fleeing and hiding. Si Lian and Qi Qingxuan debated whether they should step in to help. Since they hadn't been exposed yet, they could continue to help out in the dark, but if they were to walk in openly, then they'd risk getting caught altogether. On the other side, Lang Qianqiu exhaled loudly and finally pushed back the heavy, long table again. Behind the red curtains, Fu Cheng's figure was still leaning against the chair. He curled his 5 fingers into a fist, and then released them lightly. Instantly, the table exploded into sawdust and flew towards Lang Qianqiu. The force of this gust full of splinters was as sharp as knives, more fearful than any kind of weapon. If Lang Qianqiu was to keep his powers hidden and remain in his mortal form, he wouldn't be able to evade the attack no matter what. Thus, moments after, when his body started emitting a faint light, Si Lian and Qi Qingxuan understood right away and panicked. Oh no, he's going to reveal his true form. But this faint sheen of spiritual light suddenly vanished as soon as it appeared. Lang Qianqiu had probably remembered that he wasn't supposed to reveal his identity on this trip and caught himself at the last second before quickly withdrawing his power. Although Lang Qianqiu had taken a step back, Fu Cheng, on the other hand, hadn't. The crimson figure sitting leisurely behind the red curtain made another hand gesture. This time, he pressed his fingers together and lightly flicked up. With this one motion, Lang Qianqiu's body lifted off the ground. Like a starfish, his body was suspended on the ceiling of the gambling hall. Not realizing what had just happened, Lang Qianchu was still incredibly confused as to how he suddenly started floating and struggled to break free. Xi Lian sighed in defeat. Now that his power's been sealed, even if he wanted to use it, it'd be impossible. Qi Qingxuan agreed. Since the Ghost City is Hua Cheng's territory, if he wanted to seal it, then he could. Even though Lang Qianchu had been apprehended before the crowd, at least there was a merit that could be gained from it, which was the fact that his identity would be protected. If he had continued the brawl back then and released his powers, it would be hard to explain as to why Tai Hua Shen Jun, the Eastern martial god, would come to the Ghost City to wreak havoc. After all, over the course of the years, unless it was something extraordinary, heaven and hell all minded their own businesses. Seeing that the boisterous guest that had barged into the gambler's den had been detained, the crowd that fled returned and gathered in the hall once more. They pointed at the suspended Lang Qianchu and laughed. Lang Qianchu had never experienced this kind of humiliation before, and his face flushed red as he wordlessly struggled against the invisible binds. From time to time, a ghost from below would jump up in an attempt to pat his head. Fortunately, Hua Cheng had hung him fairly high up, far from reach, or else he would end up being the embarrassment of the century. Hua Cheng chuckled from behind the curtains. What an interesting catch today. I'll let you guys play with it. Whoever's lucky and wins big can take it home to roast. The cheers that erupted within the hall were endless. Bet on the roll. Let's bet on the roll. The highest roll can take him home to roast. Ayaya, this little gege looks pretty delicious, hee 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 hee. Ha ha, who's the fool now? That'll teach you to cause trouble around here. The four masked bouncers carried in a new long table, and the crowd flocked to the area once again to start the next round of bets. The masked man who was clutching his hand and howling on the ground was long forgotten. The bet this time around was no other than Lang Qianchu, who was suspended in midair. Seeing that people on the other end were riled up, Qi Qingxuan anxiously paced back and forth, waving his hands around aimlessly. What do we do? Should we go up and win him back? Or is it better to just fight? Xi Lian asked, Lord Windmaster, how's your luck? Qi Qingxuan replied, it's sometimes good, sometimes bad. There's no certainty in something like luck. Xi Lian said, there can be. For example, look at me, I've never had any good luck. Qi Qingxuan gaped. Is it that bad? Xi Lian nodded gloomily. Whenever I roll, the most I'd get is snake eyes. Qi Qingxuan knitted his brows, but an idea came to him in an instant and he sapped his thigh. How about this? Since the most you can get is snake eyes, then you should bet on the lowest number. There can't be anyone who'd roll lower than you. After a moment of consideration, Xi Lian agreed. You have a good point. Let me try. So, he found a place near the table and threw out a suggestion. Why not switch the rules up a bit and see who can roll the smallest? The lowest roll wins. How about that? The crowd around the table was chaotic. Some agreed, some disagreed. Xi Lian decided to take 2 dice and give it a try first. Before he rolled, he chanted mentally, small, small, small. The dice were tossed, and the 2 leaned in to take a look. 2 sixes. Xi Lian. Qi Qingxuan. Xi Lian rubbed his forehead in defeat. It seems that not even a change of rules could change my luck. Shi Qingxuan mirrored him in rubbing his forehead. Maybe it's better if we just fight outright. Just then, a croupier walked towards the red curtains and leaned in, as if trying to hear what the figure behind was saying. She nodded, raised her head and announced, "Everyone, can I have your attention? Please. The Lord has an announcement to make." Hearing that the Lord had something to say, the crowd immediately dropped everything and fell silent. The croupier continued, "The Lord said to change up the rules." Chatter broke out in the crowds. The Lord is the rule. The rule is whatever the Lord dictates. What are we changing it to? The croupier responded, "The Lord said that he's in a good mood today, and wanted to play a couple rounds with everyone. Anyone is free to bet against him. Whoever wins gets to take home the thing above. Whether you want to steam it, boil it, fry it or pickle it, it's all up to you." Hearing that they'd be betting against the Lord, all the ghosts and demons started to have second thoughts. It seemed that Hua Cheng never really stepped in to gamble himself. Out of all the courageous ones, not one would dare to come up first. Above them, Lang Qianchu struggled with endless determination. He barked, "What do you mean, thing? I'm not a thing. You dare to use me as a bet?" His proclamation of not being a thing was heard by the many female ghosts in the crowd. Giggling, they sent him lecherous looks while running their bloody, sharp tongues across their lips, as if they wanted to swallow him whole. Si Lian thought, "Sigh, this child. It's better if you speak less." After a soundless sigh, Si Lian stepped forward and said softly, "If that's the case, then please let me have a try." Upon hearing his voice, the shadow behind the red curtains paused, before slowly standing up. The croupier in front of the curtains smiled. "Then, please come forth, young master." Within the hall, demons and ghosts automatically parted for this brave warrior. When Si Lian reached the end of the path, the croupier presented to him the polished black gambling cup in her hands. "Please go ahead, sir." To all the previous gamblers, she had always used a casual way of speaking. Despite the ordinary words that were uttered, her tone wasn't polite in the slightest. However, now, to Si Lian, not only had she switched to using honorifics, the tone she used was also exceedingly polite and respectful. Si Lian received the black gambling cup from her with a word of thanks, and lightly cleared his throat. Since he never had any experience with something like gambling, he shook the cup randomly for a good while and pretended that he knew a thing or two. As he moved his hands, he raised his head and glanced at Lang Qianchu, who was hanging above. Lang Qianchu's eyes were wide open, staring at him, thankfully. He didn't make a sound. His expression somehow made Si Lian want to laugh, but he held it back. After a long shake, he finally stopped. Countless pairs of eyes zoomed in on the cup in his hands, and Si Lian felt that somehow, this tiny little gambling cup had grown heavier. He didn't know if there was a right way to flip it. However, just as he was about to reveal the outcome, the croupier stopped him. "Wait. Is something the matter?" Si Lian asked. That croupier replied, "The Lord said your cup-shaking posture isn't quite right." Si Lian thought to himself, "Is there really a correct way of doing this? Was all my bad luck before due to my bad posture?" He asked modestly, "May I ask what the correct posture is?" The croupier responded, "The Lord has invited you to go up, as he's willing to teach you Upon hearing this, the crowd of ghosts within the den voiced the discontent. Si Lian heard a ghost mutter, "To think the Lord would teach him, does that mean he's gonna die? The Lord wants to do what? Just who is this? Why teach him? Isn't that how we all shake cups? How is there even a right way of doing this?" Si Lian also wanted to ask the same question, but the croupier already motioned him towards the red curtains. "Please go ahead." Thus, Si Lian arrived in front of the red curtains with the black wooden gambling cup clutched in his hands. The silk curtain swayed gently, almost giving life to the red silhouette. The person behind the curtains was standing directly in front of him, with only half an arm's distance between the two. Si Lian held his breath as a hand parted the heavy red curtains and landed perfectly under his, supporting the gambling cup. This was a right hand, white and elegant. The slender fingers had a red thread tied around the third. Against the pitch black wooden cup, the white looked even paler, and the red even more vivid. Slowly, Si Lian lifted his eyes. A youth, roughly around the age of 18 or 19, silently stood behind the red cloud-like silk curtains. It was San Lang. His robes were still the same maple red, and his skin white as snow. That same uniquely handsome face, with incomparable youthful expression, was now slightly more defined. That shyness of boyhood had morphed into one of calmness, and he carried an air of wild playfulness that couldn't be tamed. The same eye that twinkled like stars never moved away from Si Lian. Although as bright a star, there was only one left eye. The other was hidden behind a black eye patch. Next chapter. Ch.37, admiring the flower through red clouds, a heart full of sympathy too. The red silk curtains were only opened a small slit, but in his position, Si Lian was the only one who could make out the person behind the curtains, since he had blocked everyone else's vision in the hall. Not that they would dare to sneak a peek, anyway. That left eye watched Si Lian, and Si Lian returned the gaze, subconsciously drawn to it. Hua Cheng's appearance this time around didn't only seem to look a couple years older, but he'd also grown taller. Before, when Si Lian looked at him, he could still manage to maintain the same level of eye contact, but now, he had to strain his neck to look up. After staring at each other for a good while, Hua Cheng finally broke the silence. He said in a deep voice, "Would you like to bet on the highest or the lowest?" It was this deep voice, one that was pleasant to the ear, that pulled Si Lian back to reality. Whether it was betting on the highest number or the lowest, there was no difference, so he answered right away. "Highest." Hua Cheng replied, "Fine. Then I'll go first." Si Lian's left hand supported the base of the black gambling cup. His right hand covered the circular lid. Hua Cheng stood in front of him, with his right hand covering Si Lian's left. He guided him to shake lightly before lifting the lid. There were two dice at the bottom of the cup, a 6 and a 5. From all the way above, Lang Qianchu, with his vision like a hawk's, saw how easily the high roll took place, and his eyes widened. How did that happen? Hua Cheng gently shifted his hand, and beckoned Si Lian to give it another go. "Shake it like this. Now. You try it." Si Lian mirrored his actions and shook the cup twice, but Hua Cheng said, "Not like that." Even though he was reprimanding Si Lian, his tone was exceptionally gentle and patient. As he Explained. Hua Cheng supported Si Lian's hand with his own again, but this time, his left hand found its way to Si Lian's right hand, the one that was covering the lid. He instructed softly, like this. And just like that, the back of Si Lian's hands were enveloped within Hua Cheng's palms. When skin touched skin, Hua Cheng's hands felt temperate like jade. The exquisite silver vambraces that Hua Cheng wore were cold as ice, and yet Hua Cheng's movements were careful, and he never allowed them to come into contact with Si Lian's skin. His hands guided Si Lian's and shook the black wooden gambling cup in a rhythm that was neither hurried nor slow. Once, twice, thrice, clack, clack, clack. The sound of the two dice colliding with each other as they bounced inside the cup was crisp. Even though the shakes were gentle, Si Lian could feel waves of numbness from the back of his hands, traveling along his arm, spreading to the rest of his body. As he was shaking, Si Lian lifted his eyes to seek a peek at the other person, and realized that Hua Cheng wasn't looking at the gambling cup at all. Instead, he was watching him intently, with the corners of his mouth curved up. Si Lian couldn't help but return the fond smile, but immediately controlled himself when he remembered the crowd of ghosts that were watching him from above and below. He lowered his head and diligently studied the gesture that Hua Cheng showed him. Like this? He asked. Hua Cheng widened his smile. That's right, just like that. Seeing how Si Lian shook the cup a few more times, full of hope, he suggested, why don't you take a look? Si Lian lifted the lid and saw two white dice at the base. It was 2 threes. Rolling 2 threes was already considered an impossible feat. It was as if a gentle spring wind had blown past Si Lian's heart, and he thought, could it be that I've finally learned the trick? However, even though it was shocking, 6 points was still slightly less than 11 points. He cleared his throat and admitted, I'm sorry, I've lost. But Hua Cheng replied, don't worry, this round doesn't count. I'm teaching you right now, try again. Hearing him say this, even Lang Qianchu and Shi Qingxuan were tongue-tied. The crowd of ghosts in the hall stared with their mouths gaping open. Then came the complaints. What happened to the Lord? I thought he was gonna show him who's boss, but he actually ended up teaching him for real. How can you not count this round? You still call this gambling? If this doesn't count, then when will it count? Looks like the Lord is really in a good mood today. Hua Cheng raised his left brow, and immediately, the croupier standing by the side shushed the crowd. Everyone, please quiet down. In the blink of an eye, the hall had quieted down again. Although no one dared to speak, their stares intensified. Hua Cheng chuckled and softly whispered words of encouragement into Si Lian's ear. Why don't you try again? It might be because there were too many ghosts, demons, humans alike packed into this gambling den. That somehow Si Lian felt his face starting to heat up. Okay. Rattle, rattle, he shook twice more. This time, when he revealed the cup, it was 2 fours. Hua Cheng mused, see, isn't it a little higher this time? Although he felt that something was off, Si Lian still nodded his head. Yes, it's a little higher. Hua Cheng encouraged, you did well. Keep going. With one compliment after another, there were giggles heard in all directions of the hall. Judging by the sound, it seemed as if they all came from female ghosts. Si Lian couldn't figure it out himself just what posture was the correct one. In the beginning, he paid close attention in studying how Hua Cheng positioned his hands, how he managed the pace, and how he grasped the cup, but now he was letting Hua Cheng's hand lead him and shook blindly. While shaking, a thought came to him: what if San Lang is just playing around with me? Lang Qianqiu, who had been watching from above, probably felt the same and couldn't hold it in anymore. You stop shaking the cup. He's obviously playing you. There's no such thing as a correct posture. He must have cheated. Hearing that loud, boisterous voice, Shi Qingxuan covered his face in second-hand embarrassment again. Mumbles and muttering grew louder amongst the crowd, and a rain of dice was thrown at Lang Qianqiu. Stupid bastard, shut up. So noisy, we're just getting to the exciting part. Through our Lord's teaching, that cultivator has gotten outcomes higher and higher, one after another. That's the undeniable truth. That's right. What do you know? Exclamation mark. Lang Qianqiu fumed. You're practically lying through your teeth, ah. Exclamation mark. He suddenly stopped in mid-speech, and his face turned bright red. It turned out a couple of female ghosts below him had roughly yanked on his dangling waistband and scolded. If you keep on causing a ruckus and spouting nonsense, G 35 will pull off your pants. Lang Qianqiu had never been threatened like this before, and his anger had made him speechless. You. Exclamation mark. He could take being beaten by a band of ghosts, but if they were to pull off his pants, then with his martial God status, that would be exceedingly embarrassing. Thus, Lang Qianqiu didn't dare to say much more. Si Lian looked up and saw the other gods sending him eye signals. It was funny and pitiful at the same time. He could only lower his head. He looked at Hua Cheng and said in a small voice, San Lang. Hearing his tone of voice, Hua Cheng chuckled. Leave him be. Let us continue.
Xie Lian gave up and, once again, held the cup and shook twice.
As expected, this time, he got 2 5s. Seeing the result, the crowd became even livelier and continued to tease Lang Qianqiu. Do you see that? Higher than the last. But Si Lian had already realized that Hua Cheng was just fooling around with him and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There was no such thing as a correct posture. When it came to him, any posture was wrong. From here on, he might as well give up on any hope of changing his luck, but just as he was about to expose himself on the last shake, Hua Cheng stopped him. Wait. Si Lian could feel the hands covering his pressing down harder and stopped his movement altogether. What's wrong? With an unreadable expression, Hua Cheng asked, this Gege, you didn't say what would happen if you were to lose. Hearing him call Si Lian Gege, Shi Qingxuan and Lang Qianqiu both wore a complicated expression on their faces. The crowd of ghosts also felt massive shivers run down their spines, and there were even a few that fainted on the spot. It was a little embarrassing to say, but because he was in a hurry before, Si Lian hadn't thought about what to bet on. He had thought of also betting 10 years of his life, but a heavenly official's lifespan was quite long, so 10 years wasn't really worth much. Money and treasure. He didn't have any. Spiritual power. He didn't have much of that either. A good amount of time had passed, but Si Lian still couldn't think of anything to bet on, so he could only turn and ask the owner of the gambling den. Do you think there's anything on me that's worth betting on? Fu Cheng chuckled at his question. Anything's fine. What have you got on you? Si Lian pondered for a little while and lightly coughed. He might as well be honest about it. I only have a half-eaten bun with me. Fu Cheng burst out laughing. Even though he laughed, no one else dared to do the same even if they wanted to. When he finally settled down, Fu Cheng nodded. That's fine. A bun will do. Hearing the agreement, not only were the crowd of ghosts shocked, but the croupiers at the gambling table too. Ever since the opening of this gambling den, there had been numerous absurd bets made: organs, life, emotions, spiritual powers, but none were a match to the one today, a half-eaten bun. Even Lang Qianchu couldn't contain his surprise. What's the meaning of this? Are you saying that I'm only worth a half-eaten bun? The crowd snickered. Someone called out, what's wrong with a bun? You already have it easy, so hurry up and shut your mouth. Si Lian could tell that this defeated voice belonged to Shi Qingxuan, who was hiding among the crowd of ghosts and demons. With a face full of smiles, Fu Cheng beamed. Come. It's the last round. Don't be nervous. Si Lian argued, I'm not nervous. The two maintained that hand-to-hand posture and shook a few times. Even though Si Lian really wasn't nervous, there was a light sheen of sweat on the hand that was sandwiched between the cup and Hua Cheng's hands. Finally, the movement came to a stop. He held his breath for the final reveal. The two dice were 2 sixes. Si Lian let out a sigh of relief and looked up at Fu Cheng. Fu Cheng quirked his brows. Oh, I lost. Even though he admitted his loss in a serious manner, he didn't sound the least bit sincere. The crowd below was engulfed in silence. Before there were still people complaining, if this round doesn't count, then when will it count? But now the answer was clear: it counts when that person wins. This much generosity was almost insane. Even so, no one would dare to comment. The croupier from before raised up the black wooden gambling cup. Congratulations to this young master. You've won this round. Everyone all politely praised. The Lord showed us a perfect loss. Beautiful. Isn't the winner taught by the Lord? He won because the Lord taught him well. That's right. Learning the correct dice rolling posture today really broadened my horizons. With such an immense amount of knowledge, even 10 years won't be enough to master it. Fu Cheng was still watching Si Lian with a grin on his face. Not shifting his gaze, he raised his arm and, with a flick of hand, Lang Qianchu dropped like a rock. Si Lian winced at the loud crash. Shi Qingxuan couldn't risk exposing himself by rushing forward, so instead Si Lian went to check up on the prince. Are you okay? Lang Qianchu got up on his feet and dusted himself off. I'm good, thank you. He probably wanted you to go up so that he could cheat and make you lose, but thank goodness you won. Si Lian thought, you're completely mistaken. If he didn't go easy on me, even if the world had turned to ashes, I would still not be able to win you back. As he was thinking those thoughts, the tinkling of bells was heard, and the sound was followed by gasps of shock that came from all directions. Si Lian turned around and saw that Fu Cheng had finally stepped out from behind the red silk screen curtains. In his previous form, Fu Cheng always sported a slightly crooked ponytail. but now loose raven locks covered vibrant red clothing, and an aura of demonic energy radiated from the handsome figure. Only the thin braid tied with a red coral bead brought a hint of mischief to the mix. The vambraces were silver, the straps on his boots were silver, the waistband was also silver, even the long, smoothly curved scimitar that hung at his waist was silver. Just like how the blade was slender and long, the person himself was also slender and tall. He was leaning against the curtains that had been parted with crossed arms and an unreadable expression. Gege, you've won against me. Si Lian obviously knew what had taken place, and said woefully, please stop teasing me. Fu Cheng raised his brow. I'm not. Why would I? Down below, the crowd of ghosts were bustling with excitement, as wild as the waves rolling in the sea. They whispered among themselves. The Lord changed his skin again today. I'm dying, his new skin is killing me. It's so tender and firm. Dying. You old hag, aren't you already dead? Exclamation mark. It seemed that because Hua Cheng never showed his true form in front of anyone and switched skins fairly frequently, even the band of ghosts in the ghost city didn't know what he looked like, and assumed that this must be another one of his fake skins. Only Si Lian knew that the one standing in front of him was the real Crimson Rain sword flower of the legends. 35 Jieji is a familiar address for older sister.